The topic is sustainability and recycling. As we all know, we had earlier had a session on sustainability and we discussed about 3P in sustainability: packaging, people, and product. We are going to discuss sustainability from a global point of view. The person who will be presenting the session today, he is having more than 22 years experience in the packaging industry. He had into different leadership roles across organizations across world. And it is our pleasure to connect him today. So we welcome Mr.Sriman Banerjee with applause. With this, I would like to request Mr. Sriman to please start his session. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Prasanjit, for inviting me, and good evening, everyone. I'll be speaking about plastic packaging sustainability and recycling in the new normal as we know it. And I'll also share aspects about other packaging materials formats as we go through and speak through the session. So basically, I'll be covering sustainability and recycling in packaging in terms of the definitions, because it's very important, as I say, to have the definitions clear in the first place. And then taking you through some sustainability end-to-end thoughts on industry examples, some future societal trends, given that we are in the middle of the COVID crisis and scenario worldwide, economics of sustainability and recycling, and then some conclusions in terms of way forward. So in the first place, what does sustainability and what does recycling mean? And at times people get confused between both the words and think either they are one and the same or have different perspectives on that. So for me, sustainability and recycling are the two ends of the same stick. And why do I say so? And if you see the definitions, so what is sustainability all about? It's using materials from sustainable or certified sources. And the best example I can give here is FSI certified paper, which most of you would know. The second definition, or the other bit of sustainability, is using materials and designs with lower carbon footprint. And a good example here is glass versus plastic. So for example, plastics might have the lowest carbon footprint, and glass, because of its energy consumption and the way it is manufactured, processed, typically tends to have higher carbon footprint. So coming to recycling now, recycling is use of materials and designs which can be segregated and recycled. And there are various definitions within the ISO framework, ISO standards, and different standards globally in terms of what is defined as recycling in that space. And what do we recycle into? So we can recycle into producing for the same application. As a good example is PET bottles. And that's the pristine form of recycling, where you use the same material either by chemical or mechanical recycling and use it again back for the same application. The second aspect of recycling is producing for alternate application, which is you take the material and you find alternate applications of it, which could be, in this case, be furniture or anything else. And I'll come to some more examples as we speak through. The other bit is used in infrastructure, which is in roads. It can be used as an alternate. And the last but not the least, it can be incinerated to generate energy, which many countries, for example, even Sweden is doing. So a good thing to note is lower carbon footprint means lower greenhouse gases, means lower global warming. Lower recycling means higher waste, resulting in landfill and pollution. And we have to balance between the both. So either of the two is extremes, as we would call it, because if you go in for 100% sustainability at times and start using plastics and do not recycle it, then we have bigger problems. In the same note, if you start using materials like glass with the understanding that it's 100% recyclable, but because of higher carbon footprint, we might have the polar ice melt and create rise in the sea levels. So, I mean, it needs to be a good balance between both of them, and both needs to complement each other in terms of the approach. Uh, Having said that, the main issue within packaging is not only sustainability and recycling, but also waste management. Because how will you do sustainability and recycling unless the waste management is taken care of? And while a lot of things has been spoken about plastics, mind you, plastics is not the only thing which is littered. As you can see in the picture, you can see metal cans, glass bottles, and a mix of other materials as well, right? So it is not limited to plastics. Having said that, the metal can or the glass bottle has not walked into the places where you see them in the pictures. Surely somebody has irresponsibly disposed of, and therefore they are lying the way they do. And to cite the example particularly of the sea, when the high tide comes, it will obviously take all the garbage into the sea. And during low tide, it again spews it back, or it retains it on the floor of the ocean. So, I mean, these are certain things which are a challenge, and we need to understand how do we take it forward. Here a couple of examples of countries how they segregate their waste and the waste management aspect of it. So as you can see in Switzerland, they have a pristine form of segregating waste, and they do it in 2 or 3 levels. So if you see in most of the streets and stores, etc., they have segregated between paper, aluminium, glass, PET, and other waste materials as well. So that in case you're consuming anything on the go, you can dispose of within these printings. Having said that, for household recycled material, they have something called as a déchetté, where every week you're expected to go and separate your packaging waste or your other waste and dispose it off in the different boxes which they have kept. It's a big area, and you separate your plastic bottles. So for example, if it is PET bottles, you separate the PET bottles and the cap into 2 different waste systems. Then you separate the laminates into a different, which they call it as flexible packaging disposal system. Paper is separated again, and cartons are separated again. So I mean, it's a absolute pristine form of separation which the citizens or the society will have to do themselves and dispose it off in this place called déchetté. To the extent that even for glass bottles, they have 3 or 4 receptacles, starting from transparent bottles, amber bottles, green bottles, and others. Similarly, in the US, as you can see, they have it in all offices or even public places where you can dispose of the materials. And typically in the US, you will not see anything which is for glass collectibles, because glass is limited use in the US as compared to Europe, which also means that different countries will have to evolve and develop their own waste management system which meets their requirements. Going to the next slide, which speaks basically about sustainability in the end-to-end aspect of it, because you can't be sustainable in one area and then be irresponsible in the other area of sustainability. So where does sustainability start? It starts with sourcing of raw materials and ingredients. So what is the source of it? Are you, for example, if we take into consideration paper, are you sourcing paper from certified sources, or you're sourcing it from paper mills which are cutting down forest for the use of paper? Similarly, for plastics, it could be, where are you sourcing it from? Are you sourcing it from crude, or is it being sourced from gas? And also, how far is the distance from where you're sourcing the crude? Are you sourcing it from Venezuela, or you're sourcing it from Middle East, for example, for the Indian market, and therefore converting it into petrochemicals and polymers subsequently? It's also dependent on the manufacturing. So when you manufacture something, be it again plastics or any other material, what is the manufacturing energy which you are using? Are you using solar energy to manufacture? Are you using windmill? Or you are using coal to manufacture electricity coming from coal to manufacture or produce the plastic components or even any other packaging material, including how much water you are consuming for producing that particular format. And then you go on to obviously the design part of it, how the product is designed. Can it be more lighter in weight, or can it use some more sustainable materials which can therefore be recycled as well? And last but not the least is also distribution, in terms of how do you transport many of the products, whether it's packaging components from the site of manufacture to the end converter, which is FMCG companies or pharma companies, or even beyond that in terms of distribution to the consumers or the patients in that space. So there are a lot of things which are there in the sustainability cycle, and going forward we will see more of industries taking into consideration the entire 360 aspect of sustainability than bits and pieces arising out of it. Couple of industry examples in terms of who is doing what in terms of sustainability or recycling in that space. And as you can see, I have put examples across the industry from Reckitt Benckiser to Procter & Gamble to Unilever. And you can see, for example, in Dettol, they have come up with a pack which does not use the pump, and it uses less water when, for example, you tend to compare it between using the liquid versus a bar soap, as well as it has more doses per pack because of its concentration, and saves more water and carbon because of the footprint of the pack itself. Similarly, you can see Mucinex caplets for cold and flu, which they have converted the plastic bottles into a blister pack, which therefore reduces the carbon footprint and therefore, in typical terms is termed as sustainable. And then there are a couple of examples in terms of Fairy dishwashing liquid, which is using ocean plastics, as well as the 7th generation ultra concentrate, which again uses less plastics as compared to what they were using earlier, and also uses 100% recycled PET. And obviously, as technology and design modules change, there are many things which we use today currently which can be further optimized, and therefore the carbon footprint or the recyclable quotient can be significantly improved. So some of the industry examples, again, in terms of how do we communicate what is recyclable, how do we communicate how to recycle, and how do we also communicate the carbon footprint of the packs. And as you can see in the pictorial depictions, these are some standard practices which are used worldwide in terms of communicating with the consumers in terms of how many of these things can be either recycled, where to drop it off, or even what is the typical carbon footprint of the product they are using or consuming. So there are two companies, Loop and Terracycle, which is actually partnering with all the big FMCG companies in terms of what they call it as the typical old milk business, which used to be where you used to every day in the morning return the glass bottles and take the fresh milk in a rewashed glass bottle, right? So this is something which these two companies are following, in which they collect back all the packaging materials, and then they will refill it and deliver it the next day or the next week. And it is a start now in terms of reuse on to some extent even recycle of packaging materials, where they have been doing it now for nearly 2 years in that space. So coming and speaking a little bit on the COVID scenario as we see today. So there are three aspects of the COVID scenario, which is pre, current, and post. And the reason why we have to capture all the three is we will see societal changes in terms of how things happen, how people behave, and other aspects of it in the coming years. And I also have a slide, as I had mentioned in earlier, which will also I'll cover in terms of what societal trends we will see going forward. So a couple of aspects on what we see in the pre-COVID scenario is there were a lot of proposed regulations on single-use plastics, recycling, end user responsibility, and a lot of taxes being applied on packaging materials. There were significant corporate commitments and stewardships on, again, packaging, which was made by most of the FMCG corporates. And there was an initiation of societal education and awareness related to sustainability and recycling. What we are seeing currently during the COVID crisis is many countries are reversing single-use plastics and bags to maintain hygiene, which includes countries in Europe as well as in US. And if many of you would recollect, California was actually the first state in the world which banned plastic bags. But as the COVID crisis hit them, they again approved the use of plastic bags because it was the most safest way of delivering food as well as buying groceries in store. Similarly, additional packaging materials are being introduced and as an overwrap over an existing, packed product, or even I would say in terms of the vegetables and fruits which are available in supermarkets and stores, they are now coming pre-packed in terms of direct to buy or direct to use aspects of it. Availability of recycling materials is also becoming a challenge as we speak because of the COVID crisis, as the supply chain, or I would call it the way the garbage is collected, is changing because of hygiene and several other factors. And last but not the least, on the plastic aspect, due to lower crude price, the cost of virgin material is lower than recycled, and therefore it's no longer making economic sense as well to use recycled material in some form or the other. Therefore, what do we see in the post era? We will see hygiene and safety will be paramount. Waste management and recycling will gain significant importance in that space. Economics will play an important role in recycling and sustainability, because we will also have to appreciate the fact that without economics, things would not work the way we envisage, and everything is based on the principles of economics. And as we learn more about carbon footprint, there will be new packaging materials and formats which will emerge, and some of the examples I gave in the earlier slides, but there is a lot of development worldwide which is happening in terms of packaging formats which would follow the pristine definition, as I would call it, in the ISO, which can mean that it can be easily separated out and recycled into various streams. And to give you a simple example, while the blister format in most cases might seem to be sustainable, but it's very difficult to recycle because most of the blisters are made out of, say, two materials, which is the blister itself and the lidding stock, which, for example, in the pharmaceutical space is mostly made out of aluminum foil or paper, right? So it becomes difficult to separate and recycle in that space. So there'll be a lot of material engineering and material science which will go into developing some of these formats. And the concept of circular economy as we know it will get more clear and will be well defined in the near future. With that, what is the trends in consumer behavior which will emerge out of this COVID crisis? So, couple of things which we see here in terms of social distancing, health and hygiene, and income uncertainty. In the same note, what we see is there'll be reversal of some of the past trends which we have been seeing. So which means that people will follow distancing, social distancing for some time to come. There will be a couple of aspects in which we see acceleration of existing trends, which we had already seen people starting to buy on e-commerce platforms. But with this COVID crisis over the last 2 or 3 months, depending on which part of the world you are in with the lockdown, lot many people have been buying things on e-commerce. In the US, I know a couple of my close friends and families who have not ventured out of their house for the last 2 or 3 months and have done all their grocery shoppings and all even medical shoppings through e-commerce platforms. And as I speak to you, it's gaining prominence in terms of how people buy and use things going forward as well. There will be a lot of focus undoubtedly on health and wellness, and therefore anything which is related to health and wellness will see a great focus, and any brands which makes claims on health and wellness will obviously be the choice of the consumers. The other bits is people are understanding, in terms of the remote way of living or working from home, and therefore taking undue care in terms of what needs to be done, to be safe as well as to be comfortable in terms of working from home. There is a tendency of do-it-yourself coming up with a lot of challenges which are there, but in different parts of the world, people are adjusting in terms of doing things at home themselves. And obviously, we see new focus on hygiene and cleanliness, which will come up in the near future. This is a little bit on economics of sustainability and recycling, and here I have given an example of recycled PET versus virgin PET. And as we can see, as I speak to you, the cost of recycled PET is significantly higher than virgin PET. And therefore, there is a requirement of finding applicable use of recycled PET, which can generate a new economy or generate profits arising out of it, as it may not be used for the conventional recycling of PET bottles into a new PET bottle. Therefore, what are some of the new applications which are coming up worldwide? So there is a lot of focus of using, for example, PET into making clothes, and we can see a lot of clothes, jacket, even shoes from Nike, Adidas, which are made out of recycled PET. We see a lot of purses, handbags, which are now being made out of PET, and it's become a fashion statement as I speak to you. Infrastructure, again, which are long lasting in terms of carpets, rugs, mats, including compressed plastic tiles and sheets for houses. Needless to mention also utility applications, which could be mobile covers, pens and pencil boxes, and even sports gears like canoes or any other sports gear which are external and adventurous in that space. So in conclusion, what we see is sustainability and recycling will have a new focus post COVID, and it's not going away anywhere. Healthcare and hygiene will see new investments, and there'll be a lot of focus as a society and as corporates in this area. There will be new societal habits and behaviors which will emerge, be it in terms of the comfort level of people working from home or do it yourself, or even social distancing, or even I would say, carry home food, which is again catching interest, and some of these areas will evolve over a period of time. There will be an emphasis on end-to-end carbon footprint reduction rather than bits and pieces, as I was speaking earlier, as it has to be more holistic rather than pluralistic in that area. Education will be key to implement regulations, and we see new subjects of environment and sustainability being taught in schools and colleges, with new degrees coming up in this area with specialization in sustainability. There'll be new employment opportunities which will emerge. And I can give you an example in the US, as you can see in the pictorial depiction, that nearly 4.5 million jobs were added over the last a few years in purely in terms of sustainability and recycling, with most of the companies, hiring EHS managers or EHS executives to plan and strategize their sustainability initiatives. And last but not the least, innovation on science, technology, design and application will transform, the products, the way it is currently manufactured or designed or even used in that area. So that's an overall perspective which I wanted to share in terms of what is happening on recycling and sustainability worldwide. And as I said, it's not limited to plastics, although plastics is one of the focus areas in this space. I mean, obviously, the future will entail things to come. So with that, over to you, Prasenjit.
We have a few questions, Mr. Sriman. Discussed 3 R today. One is reduce, recycle, and reuse. When we talk about reduce, you already mentioned that we have to reduce the carbon footprints. We need to select raw materials in such a way that carbon footprint is less. You have given examples, enough examples on glass and paper in that regard. At the same time, you mentioned about recycling. Recycling has to be done on energy efficient way. We should not spend more water and energy in recycling because the greenhouse effect will come otherwise. And lastly, you mentioned the reuse. You have given enough examples also how to reuse the different bottles for a better output. So with this, my question is, what is your opinion that in future plastics will be continue for some time, or there will be a lot of re-engineering done on plastics to continue in motion?
So, couple of things. I mean, all the materials which we use today, more or less in the immediate near future, or as I would call it, in our generation, will stay, right? However, we don't know, the significant long-term future in terms of what evolution, what developments happen in many of these places.
Okay.
Plastics per se is not a bad material. And plastics, we have seen it even during the COVID crisis. It was the savior in various forms, be it in personal protection equipment. The gowns which you see, they are all made of plastics, as most of you would know. The masks, which are again made of non-woven plastics. The hand sanitizer bottles, which are all made of PET, right? So, I mean, overnight you can't make glass bottles and support the system. So okay. Plastics is here to stay. It is just going to be responsible use of plastics which is going to determine which direction it follows. And as I started off by saying, Prasenjit, it's not only a plastic problem, it's also a waste management problem. And the more packaging we use and we are not responsibly disposing it off, we will, further see this crisis, whether it's in plastics or metals or glass, it will all remain the same.
Yes, there is one more question from Mr. Venkat. As you said clearly, the ascent is more towards recycling, more consumer participation, new infrastructure creation, etc. What do you think of biodegradable plastics? Is it commercially available, say for in India or even in US also?
So biodegradable plastics is, it's an area which is evolving, and there are different thoughts coming on biodegradable plastics, and some are obviously more scientific rationale in that space. So for example, biodegradable plastics do not degrade by itself. They require some bits of compostable or oxy or, some aspect of it in terms of degrade. So unless they are again put inside the system of compostable or equivalent, they will not degrade on their own, and therefore it does not solve the problem in its entirety. The second bit is the biodegradable plastics, when it gets into the conventional plastic recycling system, it creates problem because biodegradable plastics, typically cannot be recycled and reused because of the nature of the chemical composition. And there is no separate, stream which is being developed for biodegradable plastics today in terms of recycling or anything of that nature, because it's a very small component of work which is happening. Having said that, I would say it's a new fad in terms of the claims which are being made in terms of biodegradable plastics. And yes, biodegradable plastics is available in US and in many parts of the world, being made by Braskem and a couple of other companies in that space, albeit in small quantities and used typically for food applications or disposables, as we say.
There is one more question, Mr. Sriman, from Ajay Patel. He's also from our IIT. What if companies can be charged higher cost for single-use plastic? Can we take it as a commercially that the company who will be producing single-use plastic and those who will be producing non-recyclable get plastics, they will be charged, they will be levied differently?
So, I mean, as I mentioned also in the presentation, that there is taxes which were being planned or are being planned by intergovernmental agencies on packaging, whether it's single use or even multi-use in that space. It's got nothing per se to do with EPR. It's, taxes are always controversial, as we all know, right? Taxes are meant for multi-purposes. It could be meant for, filling up the empty government coffers, or it could be also meant for applicable use, or it could also be meant for deterrence of use as well. Having said that, what needs to be done is the waste management and the recycling infrastructure has to be created in the first place. That is the basis of future developments in any area. What has happened is, historically, while everybody was focusing on sustainability or even recycling, the back room or the back office infrastructure was never getting created till some few private entities joined and started creating this infrastructure, which now is available in different parts of the world on segregating, recycling, and using many of these materials. As we can see, Coke is a good example where most of their PET bottles in the US are made out of chemically recycled PET, and it is it's an economic interest of Coke as well, which enables them to get the raw materials without making big struggles in that area. So it's a balance between economics, taxes, infrastructure, and lot many things in that area, I would say.
Okay, I have one last question for this session today, Mr. Sriman. You have mentioned about the job possibilities and future job scenarios in sustainability and recycling. I mean, there are a lot of students in this webinar also. What is your last word? What is your final word for them to get a job in recycling and sustainability?
So, Prasanjit, they will, there are, as I started off by saying in the education sphere, that there are a lot of new courses which are being offered in terms of environment, sustainability, and recycling. I would say these are the three pillars. And we will, I mean, anybody who wants to have a career in these areas will have to do these specialized, courses to understand a little bit more about what all the three pillars mean. How do you calculate carbon footprint? What is the impact of carbon footprint? And various other aspects of it, which, I mean, there is, you have CPIT, which is initiated this course from this calendar here. Then you have various private universities which are now offering masters in these areas. And obviously there are various other short-term courses available as well.
Fantastic. You have to attend How Unisex Blister Pack is More Sustainable Compared to Bottle by Devaprakash Sharma. Prakash.
Yeah, so when I mentioned that, I was very clear in that space that while the blister, because of its carbon footprint, is much more sustainable, but it is not recyclable, right? While the plastic bottle might be recyclable, but because of its higher weight and the way it is manufactured, is having a higher carbon footprint, and therefore, on the other side of sustainability. So I hope that answers the question of
Yes,
Daya Prakash.
fantastic. So thank you very much, Mr. Sriman, for being with us in spite of your odd timings. Thanks all the audiences for being with us. We look forward to further more sessions from everyone. So once again, thank you very much, and allow me to close the session today.
Thank you, Prasenjit, for inviting, and wish you all a nice evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.